study the life of Fidel Castro and the Cuban Revolution and our common future with that revolution and the Cuban people. My name is Tony Montiero, and I'm affiliated with the Saturday Free School here at the Church of the Advocate. There's some leaflets on the back that tells you about what we do, what we try to do, and what we've been doing for almost 5 years now. My two colleagues, Jahan and Meghna, we have been organizing this conference now for about 6 weeks since the conference that was held here on December the 9th on Revolutionary Science for Radical Times. This is a continuation of this. There will be many speakers and poets, and well, we hope that everyone participates. This is, as they say, a participatory activity. We don't want anybody to lay back and just listen, and then when you leave here, go home and say, well, they didn't say this or they didn't say the other. If we want everybody to speak, to debate even how we go forward. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you my colleague, Meghna Chandra.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the conference, Fidel Castro, the Cuban Revolution, and Our Common Future. We, the organizers of this conference and the Saturday Free School, believe that the struggle to fundamentally change the world is as much a struggle to understand it and to develop ourselves as it is to organize and mobilize. We develop ourselves to see the world from the perspective of poor and working people who will be at the center of any true revolution. We develop ourselves so we can speak a language of resistance that is rooted in the working class. We develop ourselves so we can do a politics that centers the global collective rather than the narrow individual. We develop ourselves so that we strategize to fight for an entirely new society rather than for the crumbs of the one that crushes us now. At our first conference, we looked at the tradition of resistance that has offered the most hope to working people in this country, the Black radical tradition. With the wisdom of our movement elders and a commitment to deep study, we built a united Black power space that challenged Temple University's gentrification of North Philadelphia. At our second conference, the Conference on Revolutionary Science in Radical Times, we studied the science and the logics behind revolutions, with the conviction that we cannot change the world unless we understand it. We decided that our collective would be rooted outside the university in people's institutions like the Saturday Free School and the Church of the Advocate, where we are here today. Because we believe that universities under neoliberalism have failed to produce knowledge for a better world, and that the people are the true source of all knowledge. At this conference, we study a country that has gone beyond dreaming and has actually done so much of what we are imagining and organizing for, barely 100 miles from the United States border. We celebrate Fidel Castro and the Cuban Revolution for showing us what a revolutionary society looks like and study how they did it so we can carve our own path forward. We will begin the day with art and poetry, which will continue throughout after each panel. Divya Nair, Iware Oseande, Susan Abuhawa, Jahanzaib Choudhry, Brandon Doe, Osaze Bem, Quinn Doherty, Regina Johnson, Ali Richardson, and Derek Gantz, and I will share with you the art and music of resistance and revolution. We as organizers chose to center art and poetry because we believe that revolution is as much about the celebration of the life that has been denied to us as much as it is about having the correct analysis. Our artists transform our conference into a revolutionary space, and we honor them. From 11:15 to 1:15, we will have the panel Fidel Castro, the life of a great revolutionary of our times, with Felix Wilson, Pam Africa, Jahan Choudhry, and Skipper Bailey. After lunch, which will be served downstairs, we will have the panel Internationalism and Resistance to Imperialism with Anya Lumba, Tasneem Siddiqui, Suzanne Adley, and Sharon Subique. From 5:15 to 6:30, we will have Science and the Processes of Revolution, the role of the Cuban Revolution in determining the future of humanity, with Brandon Doe, Jive Subique, and Nijmi Zrinko. From 7 o'clock to 8:15, we will have the panel The Future, Tomorrow is Today, with Dr. Tony Montiero and Daniel Cuban. Thank you for coming to study with us today. Despite the sadness that I've seen on my Facebook newsfeed and on the front pages of the New York Times and the Washington Post, I find hope that masses of people are calling for an end to empire and capitalism. Love and solidarity to all of you and to everybody who practices knowledge for liberation.
Hi, I'm Choudhry, and I wanted to read out the mission statement we worked on for today in order to understand what the goal of today is. So, this event seeks to study Fidel Castro's life, its relationship to the Cuban Revolution, and to the struggles of the American people and of humanity. This is conceived as a contribution to ideological clarity and theoretical sophistication in a time when the neoliberal capitalist regime globally faces a crisis of unprecedented dimensions. It is hoped that from this symposium will come new ways of thinking about the future, new ways of organizing, and new practices of liberation for this time. The Cuban Revolution constitutes a new moment in humanity's revolutionary history. This is so because it tackles fundamental contradictions of the capitalist epoch: colonialism, white supremacy, class exploitation, poverty, the inequality of women, and the oppression of the rural masses. Its leadership insisted from the outset that the goals of the revolution were more than to topple the dictatorship and build socialism in Cuba, but to assist humanity in resolving in practice the main contradictions of this epoch. It therefore became a selfless part of the world's revolutionary and emancipatory forces. The Cuban Revolution's contribution to the liberation of Africa, the Palestinian people, and African Americans is unprecedented, and a historic contribution to human emancipation and world morality. The revolution is thus a monumental contribution to humanity as a whole. In confronting modern systems of global oppression in a revolutionary manner, the revolution produced a new type of leadership and a new human being. To make possible the people's self-actualization and self-liberation, the revolution created new political mechanisms and institutions of the state and the masses. At their foundation is revolutionary democracy. At the same time, a new vanguard of people was forged. Its central vehicle is the Cuban Communist Party. The Communist Party was forged from several revolutionary trends existing at the time of the toppling of the dictatorship. Among them, the July 26th movement, the old Cuban Communist Party, elements of Cuba's socialists and revolutionaries from the workers' and peasants' movements, as well as revolutionary intellectuals and artists. Comandante en Jefe Fidel Alejandro Castro Ruiz was the paramount leader of the revolution. The celebration of the Cuban Revolution is therefore a celebration of its leadership, especially the first among equals, Fidel Castro. Simultaneously, to celebrate Fidel Castro is to celebrate the Cuban people and the Cuban Revolution. Fidel emerged from the people and remained until his death faithful to them. He is a figure of world historic significance. His leadership was forged by human processes that were both universal and specific to Cuba. It was characterized by its high moral standards, political principles, modesty, rejection of the cult of personality, humility in the manner of his day-to-day life, and a refusal to put himself above or before the people. Fidel Castro was an exemplary human being and a model of what revolutionary leadership in our epoch must become. He believed that the highest form of leadership is collective leadership. He upheld the dialectical approach to knowledge. The theory becomes knowledge as it is linked to revolutionary practice, and that international and inter-civilizational revolutionary unity is the path to consolidating national revolutions and laying the foundations for ending global imperialism, white supremacy, and class and gender oppression. He was a fierce opponent of narrow nationalism and bourgeois individualism. As humanity faces the possibility of the imminent collapse of the capitalist world order and the revolutionary transformation of human and socio-economic relationships, the life of Fidel Castro and the Cuban Revolution must be part of our common understanding of the future. Lessons from Fidel's life teach us how revolutionaries connect to the people, what revolutionary leadership looks like, how revolutionaries address and solve the intersecting problems of racism, the oppression of women, class exploitation, illiteracy, lack of health care, and the entire barbaric heritage of capitalist, colonialist, and racist exploitation. It teaches us about international and inter-civilizational revolutionary solidarity and how the fight for peace is at once the fight for liberation. This symposium is an act of solidarity with the Cuban Revolution and all humanity who struggle for peace, justice, and genuine freedom. It is at the same time an act of revolutionary optimism, founded on the conviction that if we fight, we will be victorious. Hasta la victoria siempre. A luta continua a victoria acerte. Thank you.